Hello and welcome to The Window on talkSPORT, brought to you by Intuit QuickBooks. Save time and unlock growth with integrated business tools and AI automation all in one place. Today I'm joined by talkSPORT's transfer expert, Ben Jacobs. We've got loads to get through, Ben. So let's start on Marc Guéhi, shall we? Because there'll be fans of Man City, Liverpool and Arsenal, all of whom have been linked with Guehi, who'll be interested to know what the latest is with that.
Marc Guéhi's got a big decision to make, and the future will ultimately depend on the Crystal Palace captain, because Crystal Palace are prepared to do a deal mid-season, but Guéhi might prefer to wait and then take his pick of clubs after the World Cup when there'll be more suitors. At the moment, Manchester City are exploring a deal for January, and that's because Josko Gvardiol, Ruben Diaz and John Stones are all out. But I think Guéhi is almost the roadblock because he's quite prepared to wait. And he knows if he just keeps playing at Crystal Palace, that's his best chance maybe of getting a starting spot in Thomas Tuchel's World Cup squad, especially if you factor in Harry Maguire's not playing every week. And at the moment, Levi Colwill, the Chelsea defender, is injured. So Guéhi's not agitating to go mid-season, but Crystal Palace might prefer the money. And the money won't be nominal, by the way. My understanding is that if Palace are to sell mid-season, they want in excess of the 35 million that they agreed with Liverpool over the summer. And the reason why that number's more is because Palace accept they need a replacement, and they themselves might have to overpay for a target in January, because the January market tends to favour the seller and the buyer has urgency. So often they have to pay a higher number. And it remains to be seen whether Man City will bid that number, knowing that Guehi will be a free agent in the summer. Arsenal are there. They prefer to do the deal in the summer. The same can be said for Liverpool as well. And several other clubs like Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid. Barca have looked, but I'm told they think Guehi's wage is too high. That's not because Guehi's being unreasonable. He just wants a relatively lucrative Premier League wage to make him top 5, top 10 earner at a particular club. But of course, Barcelona's finances are relatively tight. So Guehi's got lots of different options. Liverpool have got Konate and Van Dijk. Arsenal have got Gabriel and Saliba. And therefore, Guehi, if he's inclined to join one of those two clubs, may, as I said before, prefer to do the deal in the summer, simply because if he joins a big club and becomes a squad player, then it might impact not his chances of making the World Cup squad, but potentially his position as a starter. And that's what he wants. So this is all about the player. If the right number is hit, Crystal Palace are prepared to sell mid-season.
Let's move on to Spurs, can we please, Ben? There was a story yesterday linking them with the Brazilian left-back Souza from Santos. What's the latest with that one and any other player they might be interested in?
Well, Tottenham are going to be busy mid-season. They need to back Thomas Frank. Signings are clearly needed because form is inconsistent. It was a really disappointing late loss to Bournemouth last time out via that Antoine Semenyo fairy tale, and we can speak a little bit about his move to Manchester City in a moment. The number one priority is to find an attacker, and I think it's even more important now because Mohamed Kudus has picked up an injury. But prior to Kudus being sidelined, the whole point was to still find a versatile forward, left-sided, either a winger or potentially even a number 9. And I think in the next two windows, both will happen, a number 9 and a winger. Yan Diomande and Semenyo are two targets over on that left-hand side. Diomande is going to be difficult to do in January. Leipzig's position is essentially they don't want to sell and they value the player around 100 million euros. But I'm told that suitors, Tottenham, Manchester United, Bayern and PSG all feel that a deal could be possible a little bit cheaper. And some even argue quite considerably so, around the 60 million euros ballpark. But because the player is at AFCON with the Ivory Coast and he only joined Leipzig at the beginning of this season, it might be more a summer saga. And from Thomas Frank's point of view, he's pushing more for players with Premier League experience. So the favoured profile is Semenyo. It remains to be seen whether Semenyo going to Manchester City unlocks that deal for Tottenham. I think sources I speak to tend to lean towards Semenyo, maybe going during the summer, and instead it's Oscar Bob that could be on the move in the month of January with Dortmund, one of the interested clubs there. But the thing to understand about the Semenyo deal from Tottenham's point of view over the summer is money and player side, both not a problem. Tottenham bid somewhere around the £70 million mark. And financially, that was acceptable to Manchester City. But Ferran Soriano in particular, I'm told, blocked the deal. And it was less about the finances and more about the fact that City didn't want a repeat of letting a young player go, like in the case of Cole Palmer, and seeing him set the Premier League on fire for another club. So if with Semenyo or other wingers at Pep Guardiola's disposal, they've changed their mind, Tottenham could return with a similar offer to the summer and get that deal done. It just remains to be seen whether that is mid-season. And Semenyo wanted the move to Tottenham as well because he wants to play more regularly. So keep an eye on the left-hand side for Tottenham. But now they have to maybe look at a more versatile player. And in hindsight, obviously, selling Brennan Johnson to Crystal Palace has been a mistake because he would be coming in the absence of Mohamed Kudus. But Tottenham naturally at the time felt that it was good money for Brennan Johnson. The case now is whether they can reinvest that effectively in the market. And then there's Souza, the young Brazilian left back, as we broke exclusively on talkSPORT. An attacker and someone with a bit more experience is the top priority, but they also want to bring in left back cover as well for Destiny Udogie because Jed Spence naturally is more inclined to play on the other side, even though he can do both. And Ben Davies is one of the older players at the club. So it makes sense for Spurs to find a young teenage profile who can play at left back, and that is Souza. So where we're at the moment is Tottenham are in advanced talks. We broke this story on talkSPORT. 50 million euros is the offer on the table. And I'm told that this deal is not far off and the player is keen on the move. Now, we've seen some reports out there that Souza has a release clause of 100 million euros, which is informing Santos's valuation. And originally, I was led to believe something relatively similar. But having done some digging in the last 24, 48 hours, my understanding is that 100 million number is actually in local currency. So it's not 100 million euros. It equates to about 13 million pounds. And that's basically Tottenham's offer at the moment, 13 million pounds or 50 million euros. They're negotiating over the payment terms, but Tottenham could, to my knowledge, if they can't get the payment terms in place, just choose to trigger the release clause because it's not 100 million euros. It's much cheaper. And it's basically the 15 million euros that they've put on the table. It's just that Tottenham are looking to go outside the release clause to get more preferable payment terms. So keep an eye on Souza to Tottenham. We might see movement in the next 24 to 72 hours. And the player, as I say, would like to go to Spurs.
Some welcome good news for Spurs fans there then. Let's move north of the border now, please, Ben. Rangers chairman Andrew Kavanagh spoke with fan groups last night about a potential few new transfers, which could be done by this weekend, according to Danny Roll.
Well, Rangers are turning their season around under Danny Roll, and they're suddenly right up there in the title race, along with Celtic, whose form has been poor, with Martin O'Neill coming back in, and of course Hearts leading the table as well. And what a story that would be if they can win the SPL. So Rangers are trying to add depth in a couple of key positions, defensive cover, and also a playmaker. And they're in the market, whether now or in the summer, for an out-and-out number 9 as well. So there's 2 deals that have been almost confirmed, and as far as I'm aware, are agreed in principle. One is for the Westerlo left back, Tor Romans, who's 22 years of age, and as I'm speaking, is on his way to complete formalities, and that deal is worth about £3 million. And then the second player that Rangers have agreed a deal for is Tochi Chukwani, and the fee there is going to be somewhere in the region of £4 million. And he is a midfielder for Sturm Graz. And again, at the moment, with the deal agreed in principle, that is only pending formalities as well. And these 2 deals basically tick the imminent boxes as far as Danny Roll is concerned. Left back needed. And in addition to that, a source of versatility and creativity, whether in that midfield role or a little bit further up the field. And as we revealed on talkSPORT, one option prior to these 2 deals getting done in the latter category was Josh Windass, a surprise reunion with Danny Roll, because Windass only joined Wrexham over the summer. But Rangers had made an approach in early January to try and do a loan deal there, knowing that the player was open to a reunion with his former manager. didn't come off, unsurprisingly. Wrexham didn't want to sell, so Rangers turned their focus to other targets, and now they've got 2 through the door. Keep an eye, though, on number 9. Might not happen in January, but for the summer, I think they'll be looking for more of a target man as well, a big, tall striker, somebody that can really drop deep and hold up the ball or get in the box and score goals using aerial prowess. That's the other kind of profile, I'm told, on the shopping list. And Rangers are doing all they can to try and get back into this title race. And they've done an excellent job under Roll, because let's not forget where they were under Russell Martin. It was all doom and gloom. It looked like they'd be too far back and that Celtic and Hearts would generate a big lead. But Rangers were fantastic in the Old Firm derby, and now they find themselves in a 3-way race for the SPL title.
Yeah, that one looks like it could go down to the wire. But let's move back to the Premier League now, please, Ben, and talk about Callum Wilson, because since West Ham have brought in a couple of forwards in the last week, it looks like his time there might be coming to an end.
Callum Wilson is a really interesting story, and right now it's looking likely that he's going to leave West Ham on a free transfer. My understanding is there's almost a verbal agreement in place for Wilson to leave as a free agent, and that would mean he doesn't have to find a club absolutely imminently, because free agents can transfer outside of the winter window. And this has really come about for 2 reasons. The first is that Nuno Espirito Santo has been a driving force in bringing in 2 attackers in Tati Castellanos from Lazio for big money, and on top of that, Pablo. And the second is that Wilson is on quite an incentive-driven and lucrative pay-as-you-play type contract. So the more he's involved for West Ham United, the more costly it is for them. And given his age and 2 new faces through the door, I think all parties now accept that it's better that Wilson's contract is terminated. So I'm expecting movement on this front in the next maybe week or so. Wilson spoke to Nuno Espirito Santo, and they've got a good relationship off the field, and Wilson has been a model professional, and he was told by the West Ham boss that he just wasn't going to get that much game time after the 2 new additions arrived. And as a result, Wilson has also accepted that he needs to leave the club. Now, Nuno Espirito Santo is under pressure. There's a very interesting Premier League game coming up between Thomas Frank's Spurs and Nuno's West Ham, and both managers are coming under scrutiny. But my information is that Wilson wants to leave and terminate his contract, regardless of whether West Ham end up making a managerial change. And he's got a few early stage options. Chris Sutton has spoken out and said Celtic would be a good fit. There's been no approach yet from Celtic, but you never know. That could be one to watch. But there's more concrete interest from Leicester City, who have had Mikel Antonio on loan. And I believe that he's picked up a muscle injury, and Leicester haven't committed to signing Antonio on a free transfer as of now anyway. But they would be interested in speaking to Callum Wilson, and 2 Saudi clubs to watch as well if Wilson was interested in going to the Saudi Pro League. One is Al Shabab and the other is Al Ittifaq. I'm led to believe at the moment that Ittifaq's interest is more historical, and they'd only reconsider it if, as expected, Wilson becomes a free transfer. But also the wage could not be astronomical, because clubs like Ittifaq don't have big budgets compared to the PIF-owned clubs in Saudi Arabia. And they are mid-season with not that much money to work with, plus the fact that there's a strategic shift in Saudi to move away a little bit from the big money thrown at players who are over the age of 30. Al Shabab's interest is perhaps more active, and they would be, I'm told, prepared to do the deal mid-season. So 2 Saudi clubs looking at Callum Wilson, possibly Leicester City. We'll wait and see whether Celtic also choose to enter the race, if, as expected, Callum Wilson becomes a free transfer after terminating his contract with West Ham United.
On to Semenyo then, Ben. That's a deal that has been done.
Antoine Semenyo is official to Manchester City as expected. There was no Liverpool hijack as part of that deal. despite some reports, Liverpool had decided by really early December that they were not going to enter that race. And then Semenyo made it clear to all suitors that he wanted Manchester City. Manchester United were really the closest rival, and they pushed quite hard. They were prepared to pay 65 million or so in the month of January as well. But for Semenyo, given his age, he wants a project that's quite immediate. I'm told he's in red hot form and he's looking to build on that momentum from Bournemouth. And the feeling from the player is that City is the right choice because he can go straight into an ambitious project and win silverware and play under Pep Guardiola. And then from City's point of view, Pep, I'm told, is keen for a different kind of winger. So although when they were first looking at Antoine Semenyo, it was more urgent to find goals from wide areas. Now what we're seeing along with Erling Haaland is Phil Foden back in red hot form, and Ryan Cherki's really got going in central and wide areas too. But at the time when this pursuit first started, City were looking at Jeremy Doku, Oscar Bob, Semenyo, all wingers they really like, but old school touchline hugging, not necessarily wingers with the output of a wide forward. So they were looking at Semenyo because he's a different kind of profile and ultimately can add goals from wide areas and is incredibly and naturally two-footed. So it can be utilised on both the right and the left as well. The terms of the deal are as follows. Manchester City will pay 62.5 million plus 1.5 million in add-ons. Bournemouth have got a sell-on clause. It's a record sale for them. And Semenyo has signed a 5.5-year contract. And the reason why the 62.5 million is significant is because the clause was worth 65 million to Bournemouth if you factor in the fixed fee, the add-ons and solidarity payments. But the actual fixed fee number within that clause was £60 million and it expired on the 10th of January. So what Manchester City chose to do is bid 62.5 million, so 2.5 million higher than the 60 million part of the clause to get more preferable payment terms. Because had they just triggered the clause, they would have had to pay the 60 million part in a lump sum. Instead, they've agreed to slightly higher, 62.5 million, but less add-ons. So it's only worth 64, not 65 million. And they will pay the fixed fee over a 2-year period, which is better as far as their books are concerned. So it's a deal that suits all parties. And from Semenyo's point of view, he's eligible immediately and he can play in Manchester City's League Cup semi-final as well. So Semenyo to Manchester City, done deal, and City unveiled him earlier this morning.
What about Chelsea then, Ben? It'd be interesting to see whether they do any business in this window, having just appointed Liam Rosenior.
Yeah, Liam Rosenior has been unveiled as the new Chelsea manager. Very interesting appointment, somebody that Chelsea know really well because, of course, he was at their sister club, Strasbourg. And I think that seamless transition mid-season was a big reason why Rosenior was hired. He's not identical to Enzo Maresca. And Rosenior has already described his style as really aggressive, front foot football and possession heavy. The latter is definitely a point of similarity with Maresca, and Chelsea like the fact that they know him well. He's got the relationship with the ownership group. He knows players like Andre Santos or Mike Penders, who's still currently on loan at Strasbourg, and Kendry Pyers and Mamadou Sarr. But it's more than that. When he was at Hull, he was working with one of the co-sporting directors at Chelsea, Lawrence Stewart, Sam Jewell and Paul Winstanley, plus, of course, the co-owner, Badad Eghbali, and also Todd Bowley. So this is a manager that is deemed to be a project fit. We should point out that Enzo Maresca was deemed to be a project fit when he was hired, and it all unravelled relatively quickly. Those close to Maresca are adamant that the former Chelsea boss resigned, whereas Chelsea are billing it as a departure by mutual consent over a point of difference between Maresca and the club's medical department. The Maresca side say there was more to it than that, and that there was interference with the football department from essentially Chelsea's leadership team that Maresca didn't like. We'll have to wait and see whether more information comes out. It wouldn't surprise me if over the course of the coming months, the Maresca side tell their version of the story. But Chelsea have moved on. They're delighted with the Liam Rosenior appointment. And by the way, you'll hear Rosenior, and I've just said it then, but Rosenior is the family's preferred pronunciation. But to my knowledge, because Rosenior has been so commonplace for 40 years, they're fine with that as well. So don't worry too much, Chelsea fans. You can say it whatever way you like. And Rosenior, I'll say it like that in the context of this answer just for consistency, is really excited to get going. He'll take charge of the Charlton game in the FA Cup. And then, of course, he'll have a home Champions League tie against Pathos as well, which Chelsea really need to win to stand a chance of reaching the knockout stage via the top 8, as opposed to qualifying for a playoff. Don't necessarily expect that much movement in the market to back Rosenior, because Chelsea feel that their squad is talented and there's plenty of depth around. And hopefully towards the latter part of the season, Levi Colwell will return from his ACL injury as well. And a player like Liam Delap might get going under Rosenior because they've worked together before. But in the long run, Chelsea are looking at a few key positions. Another defender could come in either now or more likely in the summer. And central midfield, I'm told Chelsea want to strengthen in as well. And they might well be one of the suitors in the summer for Nottingham Forest's Elliot Anderson. Manchester City and Manchester United may well be there as well. So Chelsea are going to be busy in the summer. January is more about outgoings. Leo Castledine, as I broke yesterday, is on his way to Middlesbrough, and that deal is worth in excess of £1 million, and some even say it's almost 2 million, and Chelsea have got a healthy sell-on clause. So we are seeing a little bit of movement regarding players out that are not part of the Chelsea project. Raheem Sterling's another one looking for options, but he only wants a permanent move, not a loan. West Ham made an inquiry. Sterling not that keen, and he won't do something that's just a loan or a loan contingent on West Ham staying up. He wants permanence. Fulham inquired for Sterling over the summer, as did Juventus and Leverkusen, but nothing came of anything. So let's see if we get any developments with Raheem Sterling. I know that Chelsea would like that situation resolved, and Axel Disasi is another one, with Roma and Lyon both interested. So I don't think that Rosenior will be that impacted by this window, because it's not thought that anything too box office will happen as far as incomings for the first team. You can never say never, because it's Chelsea and they're always alert to market opportunities. But from what I gather, Chelsea will be quite content, as they would have been, by the way, under Enzo Maresca if he was still there, with a relatively quiet January, and then just focusing on some of the fringe players and young players that they want to get out of the club. And then from there, they'll build towards the summer. But of course, the short-term goal for Liam Rosenior is to get acclimatized quickly. Their aim is still qualify for Champions League, even with a change of manager. So it's a pressure job from day one. And everything we've heard so far suggests he's going to be very comfortable and candid doing media work. So he's done everything he can so far to say all the right things and do all the right things, but he has to win games, because at the moment, Chelsea haven't enjoyed a productive festive period, and they need to turn that season around instantly to get Champions League football, and maybe, if they can, go on a deep run in the Champions League.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks, Ben. You've been watching The Window on talkSPORT, brought to you by Intuit QuickBooks. Save time and unlock growth with integrated business tools and AI automation all in one place. We'll see you next time.